Hi guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Today Alex McConaughey is going to go over session automation, or excuse me, automation. And right now I'm just going to hand it directly over to him and he can take over. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi everybody out there. I can't see you tonight because I've actually got my PowerPoint screen on and you should all be seeing it. And you can see, just like you, I dream of jellyfish and Pac-Men and eagles and omegas but I like my sleep. I like sleeping a lot. And so there's this thing that I'm going to tell you about. There's actually lots of these things that I'm going to tell you about that lets me both catch my Z's and catch my jellyfish. So here we go. Welcome to my world. This is my backyard and the various outbuildings we've got out there, various sheds. This one right here, this outhouse looking thing, that's not an outhouse. That is a shed that rolls off. Now, someday I will have all this put up into a movie. I'm supposed to be giving this presentation next week at Nightfall. Warren Keller and various other people will be doing a lot of presentations, and this is one of them that will be given. So it's not ready for prime time yet, but it's ready for you guys, and if you guys have any ideas about what to do for help me make it better and things, please feel free to tell me. These moves will eventually be real, all put together and into PowerPoint. But
now we're here.
We're out at the.
It's time to get ready for a night of observing.
Can you hear it, Adam?
What we have to do is we have to open up the observatory and roll the shed off.
Yes, I can't hear it. I can hear it fine.
You can hear it fine? Okay.
Yeah.
Keep a dust cover over the whole thing. Got a power switch over here, main power switch. Turn on the Gemini system, power system for that. If it's been a warm day, I add a bucket of ice to the water pump. That helps the cooler on the CCD. Got to pull the lens cap off. Check to make sure that everything's kind of here. It should be. That's where I left it last night or the night before. Gemini asked me if I want a warm restart. Yep. So it's going to get ready to restart. There's cables running from here over to there so that everything's connected. And here I've got a laptop. I turn the main power switch on. Turn the power switch on there. Pretty much close this up. Not out here until tomorrow morning. Gone through its setup procedure. It asked me to align telescope, go to bright star. This isn't absolutely necessary, but I like doing it. It wants me to go to, where will I go? I'll go over to Alpharets. And let's just make sure it's headed the same general direction where it should be. And Alpharets is out there someplace, so it usually does. Now I'm going to shut off for a while. We got to walk all the way back to the house, which is over there. I'll see you when we get back to the house. Okay, after I get back to the house, whoa, sorry about that. California earthquake, really with my chair just bouncing into the camera. First thing I need to do is start Type VNC. That's the program I use to risk back on my other computer. Start that up. It's basically the blank screen. You remember me starting the computer back there, and it's all ready to go. And the first thing I have to do is tell it to start Sequence Generator Pro. And up it goes, starting up Sequence Generator Pro. And it's all started here, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it to connect all the equipment, the CCD, the internal filter wheel, the RoboFocus, and the Gemini telescope. I usually can do it faster than that because I'm not talking to anybody. I just go ahead and do it. Next thing I want to do is go back there and start PhD guiding 2. Come on, PhD guiding 2, get started. There we go. Here it comes. And its server is started. That means that it's communicating with SGP. And I connect all. I do this every night, so it pretty well knows what's happening. And you can see that the indicators for camera, scope, and calibration are all connected. It's going to use the last calibration I had because I haven't changed anything on the camera, so it knows where it should be calibrated and everything else. Let's go back to Sequence Generator Pro, and there's a variety of things I could do right now. What I'm going to do right now is continue a sequence that I've been doing for about 3 days. I do narrowband imaging, so with narrowband imaging, it takes a long time to get your pictures. That sequence, I can just find it right here. It's the 2-132 from the Shopper's catalog, and I want to save that old sequences there. It opens what I had running last night, and you can see that it had already done a lot last night. Here's where I differ from some people. I go ahead and I just reset the sequence. I reset the sequence progress, and it means that all the things that it's already done, it says, okay, forget about that. Are you sure you want to reset it? Yeah. So now I've got a whole new sequence ready to go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to run the sequence. Okay? And it says camera thermoelectric cooler is not within 5 degrees of your target temperature of minus 20 degrees. Should I start it anyway? And I'm going to say yes, because the first thing it's going to do is it's going to wait until 7:40, and it's only, what time is it out there? 6:29 right now. So I've got an hour to get that cooler down to temperature. What temperature is it right now? I can check that by going here, and it's at 8.5, and it's running at 15%, 12%. So it's heading on down to the cooler temperatures. Everything should be okay. Now I'm done for the night. That's all I need to do. I will, in fact, do some other things just because. I'll show you some things I do along the way. But let me take you for a little ride here. You can see that, well, maybe you can't see it over there. I'll take you over. They've been waiting for me on Monday Night Football. So I'm going to go over to my couch, and that'll be it for the night. I'm not a morning person. You can see it. Okay. First thing I have to do is find my glasses. Okay, I have to start type BNC viewer so I can see what's on the computer back there. And this is where it was left off last night. It looks like I got a picture. There's the old pen, and it shows that it took the picture. And then I basically shut everything down. I got to come over here, start the Gemini, tell it to park, get the command wheel down position, counterweight down position. Yes, I want it to park there. Come over here. PhD guiding's been working all night. I tell it to disconnect all, and I shut it down. Shut it down. I turn off my devices out there. Sometimes I wait a little bit because the cooler has to cool down and stuff like that, but it's okay today. Cooler's off. And then I get out of here, save the sequence, come down here and tell the computer to shut down. A little bit later, I'll go out and shut the system off down outside, turn everything off down there. I'm done with the computer stuff. Bye.
Alex, can I interrupt you for a sec?
Yep.
I noticed that the Q&A app isn't active, so I just want to tell all the viewers that aren't in the live session here, you can ask your questions in the comments of the video below where you got in to see this video, and I'll let Alex know. That's probably the best place to ask them. Thank you.
Oh, let's see. What did I do? I broke my computer. Oh, I know what I have to do. Let's go back to A6. Shut down.
Okay, the last part of an imaging session is to put everything away. In my case, that means I have to turn off the main power switch to the computer,
The computer was already shut down from inside the house.
turn off the Gemini power supply and the main power switch there. Put the lens cap on, check, make sure there's no dew collected. We've had clouds move in this morning, which is not unusual here in Southern California, certain times of the year. On goes the dust cover. Clip the lock down. And we're through for the night. That's it. Time to go back to the house.
Well, back over to PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions? It might be noted that it is now 6:43. We started this broadcast at approximately 6:40, and I've just done all the work. I mean, you have seen an actual real-time version, except for the walking back and forth. You've seen that that's how long it takes. That's how much of my day has to be devoted to gathering 10 or 12 hours worth of images every night. If you want to find out more about my observatory, it's on my webpage, which is alexastro.com. From alexastro.com, you can find all sorts of junk about various things that I'm going to say tonight, including the tutorial about how to get started in Sequence Generator Pro.
Alex?
Yes.
I have one question. I hate to kill your mindset, but why don't you let the telescope park itself?
Oh, as far as I can tell, I can't figure out how to tell Sequence Generator Pro to go to the, it'll park, meaning stop. And that's what it means by park, but not park back at the counterweight down position. Now, does yours count back at CWD or whatever you use?
Well, at the end of the end of the session, it just tells it to go to a park position, and then it parks and it stops the tracking of the mount.
Yeah, and mine, maybe mine would too, but I haven't figured out how to do it, and quite frankly, everything's okay. It stops when it needs to anyway, so I haven't had a problem. Maybe later on in the session, or again, this isn't about how to work Sequence Generator Pro, so we'll get into
Go
that.
ahead.
But if I could figure out how to do that, I'd go ahead and do it too. Okay?
I think it'll do it automatically. I mean, once you run out of images, and then there's a few.
I never run out of images. I always just image until it gets bright enough and I lose my tracking, and I just throw out the last image.
It might even do it then.
Yeah. Well, okay. This isn't about Sequence Generator.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
It's the overview of automation.
Alex, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you use any kind of weather warning device?
No. Occasionally, I'll go out and it'll have shut down at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's lost its star. I can pretty well tell if it's going to rain, and I don't know if you know about this in Southern California. We've been in a drought for 2 years,
I was gonna
And
say, Alex doesn't live in Pennsylvania.
You live in a different world than us. I was just curious.
yeah, I just don't even think about. I mean, I'll go out there, and if it's getting poopy out there, I'll do something about it before I get started. By the way, we're going to take another timeout since we're in timeout right now anyway, because I've got because it got dark finally, so I want to see. I got to get PhD going for the night because I took my camera apart to change filters and take it out to the desert and stuff like that. And it's got no calibration, so I need to calibrate it before it starts working tonight. Okay, I'm back. That, by the way, that's really what I just did. I just started. I went to. Am I still screen sharing? Am I screen sharing still, guys?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, you are.
You see this here, Michael PC? I bought this as a used PC from a guy named Michael, and so that's Michael's PC. It's got VNC on it, and you can see that sequence generator, not sequence generator, PhD guiding is now going through its calibration routine while I sit here talk to you guys. And so that's okay. Back to where are we? Here we go. Back to the present. Are we ready to go back to the presentation? Okay. There are a number of programs that do what I'm about to talk about. Some of them do it better, and some of them do it not quite as well. This was a kind of a quest for me 4 or 5 years ago. I decided that I wanted to really get it down to where I could go to sleep through an imaging session. And this is where I've come to on this. Been through all these programs, and we're going to talk about each of them a little baby bit, just not very deep, in depth on anything. What I wanted was something that an automated session to me is completely unattended collection of image data. The software does everything. It talks to all the devices. It gathers and sets and saves the subframes. I don't have to do anything. I press start, I walk away, I come back, and the data is on the drive. That's all that has to happen. That's what I want in an automated session. We are going to be talking about some things, and we aren't going to be talking about other things, and it's probably good to get it a little straight as to what we're doing and not doing. We're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to take a picture, a set of pictures, some of the hardware and software that's necessary for an automated session. Some of the peculiarities that you get in an automated session that you wouldn't get in a manual session where you were sitting there locally watching what was happening. And then finally, we're going to wind up with an example out of Sequence Generator Pro because that's what I finally decided. Was that a question? Okay. We aren't going to cover certain things. We're not, I mean, like, I don't mind you asking these questions, but you got to understand, A, I may not know the answer. I know what works for me, and I'm perfectly happy with my setup. So I don't know necessarily what works with you. This isn't a session on SGP troubleshooting, okay? Nor are we going to talk about true remote imaging. Now, a couple of guys have asked me, well, you're going to talk about remote imaging then, huh? And I go, no, remote imaging is one thing, and automation is another thing. In remote imaging, you aren't there. The equipment is far away from you, or maybe it's in your backyard like it could be with me. I have no physical contact with the equipment. In session automation, on the other hand, I may or may not have contact with it. I may be able to watch the whole thing like I was doing last night. I was sleeping in my observatory, and every time I woke up, I looked, and hey, the whole thing was running just like it was supposed to. Oh, by the way, I've got another observatory besides the one you saw. I don't actually sleep out in my backyard, but I was out in the desert all weekend, so I got another observatory out there that does the same kind of automated sessions. So, and I do sleep out there when I go there. Okay, so that's not remote imaging, but it is automated imaging. In an automated session, you rely on a session manager. It's a type of software, and I don't know what the official name for this. If anybody knows the official name for this type of software, please tell me so I can correct it by next week when I have to give this presentation for reals. And it does all the things you need to do. An automated session may be remote or local, and a remote session may be automated or manual. And we're not going to be talking about remote imaging here. By the way, this is out at New Mexico skies, this background waterprint or watermark picture here. Why aren't we doing remote? Well, remote's a lot more complicated. Okay, look at the gears and chains and bells and whistles that you got to go through to get it to work. You got to have your observatory has to open at the right time, close. It has to track the stars just like the telescope does. It's got to be slave to the telescope. You got to be able to turn on the power remotely. How do you turn on power when you're not even there to turn the switch, flip the switch? Well, there's ways you can do it, but you got to figure it out. You got to be able to communicate back and forth to tell the telescope and system what to do, and to get the results from what you did. You got weather issues that you guys were talking about. I mean, you don't know when it's going to turn this way, and you got to be able to sense that somehow. Is it even safe to open up the observatory that night? You have to be extremely careful with remote imaging that your cabling and that your equipment is all doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Your cabling can't fall out. Your cabling can't get tangled. Your equipment knows where it's supposed to be and knows how to act. And finally, when all these little things that you have to have perfect aren't perfect, something's going to go wrong, and you have to have a system to recover. And that's not necessarily the case in a local session that's automated. That's why we're not really going to be talking about remote imaging. There's certainly a lot to talk about, and I hope that somebody does that sometime, but an automated session is not a remote session, and a remote session is not necessarily an automated session. Okay? They're two different concepts. At any rate, let's talk about that session manager thing. That's my name for software that either does it by itself, all within its one self, or by controlling other software, manages all your devices. They can be really simple. You know those intervalometers that you can plug into the side of your camera? You set all the exposure information and stuff on the camera dials, and then you push the intervalometer button, or you tell it how many pictures you want and how long you want them, and boom, off they go together, and they take those pictures and store them on the card. EOS Utility is a little more sophisticated, but does the same thing. Or simple session managers like Backyard EOS Nikon or Nebulosity, they can do about the same thing. But they're very simple, and I would not consider them session managers because they don't do some of the things that are really necessary, like focusing, pointing, that means moving the scope to where it's supposed to be, figuring out if it's really supposed to be there and correcting so that it is exactly there, figuring out how to handle the auto guider, how to select the star, how to get it going. It manages the camera cooler, the shutdown, and all that. And there are a number of programs that all do that fairly well. Not all of them do all of it. That's something that we'll talk about a little bit later when we get towards the end. Let's talk about what it takes to take a picture. And first, we'll do it generically by function. You got to start the equipment, aim the camera. Centering it means putting whatever you're taking a picture of smack in the middle of your frame. And you have to do that by moving your telescope. But you also might want to compose it. You may not want the actual object, the center of the object, in the center of your frame because maybe there's another object or something else. So you've got to figure out where you really want it to be taking that picture. Your manager is going to have to focus at the beginning and then refocus as the temperature changes, as conditions change, maybe as filters change. You're going to have to guide. That means that the guiding software, you saw me starting PhD with the calibration earlier, or I clicked on something on a star, okay? It's got to be able to figure out which guide star to click on and do all that other stuff. You're going to want a dither to cut down on your noise in general, and so it's going to take an interaction of the guiding software and the telescope guidance system in order to do that, and of course you want a guide. It's extremely critical that you figure out how to flip your mount. At some point, you're going to have to turn your mount from the east side to the west side because that's where the stars have gone. Or you generally have to do it anyway. I suppose you can avoid it sometimes. Finally, what's sometimes the easiest part of it all is just getting the images and putting them out on the hard drive. and then shut everything down. Okay? Going through that whole night's imaging, by the way, this is my observatory out in the desert, by device, is you have to have a very good mount that knows where it is and where it's going. It's got good periodic error control, very good pointing, the ability to correct its own pointing. It's got to be orthogonically, it's got to be at right angles to, the two axes have to be at right angles to each other so that they point right. You're going to need some kind of auto-guiding system, a focuser, and a computer. Those are all pretty obvious. You're going to need observatory controls if you've got an observatory. I don't need any observatory controls because I just pushed my roof off out there, and you saw me push my shed out in the movie. You may or may not want a rotator for a couple of reasons, and we should probably talk about those things a little bit. Under mount control, you want it to be able to point. That just means move to wherever it's going and then center that object. Now, centering, you think, hey, my mount points pretty good. Well, maybe it does, but if you're slewing from one side of the sky to the other, I don't know how many of us can just be assured that our mounts are going to have whatever it is that we want smack in the middle of the frame. So what are we going to do to figure out where we really want it and make sure that it is in fact pointing to the frame? And we'll talk about plate solving and correcting in a minute. And it's going to be you're going to want it to be able to park. Like Adam was asking me earlier, why don't I park it back at the counterweight down position in the first place? Well, because I've never figured out how to, and I've never pushed myself to figure it out because I've never really needed it to do it. How do you get it to plate solve and correct? That we're going to talk about, and meridian flip we're going to talk about in a little more detail. That's because they're both very essential functions. We pretty much know what this is about, but this stuff here gets a little spooky, particularly if you haven't done it. So let's talk about plate solving. Apparently, somebody has figured out for every set of 3 stars, there is an angle between them. And if you take a picture of the sky and you know approximately how big that picture is, the scale of the picture, you can figure out, of course, what the angles are between any 3 stars. And then you compare that to a database of all the angles between 3 stars. At least that's how I'm told it works. I think there's really a man back in Newark, New Jersey or someplace that has nothing else to do but try to figure out where your picture is, and he lives in your computer sometimes. I really don't know how plate solving works. But in Sequence Generator Pro and in various other programs, it generally, they take a picture, and this is kind of the procedures. This is a printout over here on the side from Sequence Generator Pro. First off, they determine where the reference frame location should be. And then they sync whatever you're taking. They take a picture and sync so that they know exactly where you are. They'll slew to where you're supposed to be, all right? And they rotate the camera if you've got a rotator and you've specified that you want it at a certain angle. And then they'll take a picture to see if they actually got there. They'll plate solve that picture, checking all the angles and seeing if this set of stars matches the set of stars it's supposed to match. And when it does, and then it tells you how far off you are. Here was my first slew of the evening, that this one on 132, Sharpless 132. And I failed. I was off by 408 pixels in one direction and 325 in another. I was off a total of 521 pixels, and I didn't have a rotator, so I failed. And then I failed again, and I told it to give it 5 attempts at the mast and at the most, and get it to 3 pixels. I don't think but once in the last year or so I've missed within 3 pixels and by 5. I mean, it always finds where it's supposed to go. So I use Pinpoint. Other people use other programs in there to do that work. But that's what plate solving is. And plate solving, I think, is essential to automated imaging because you have to point your telescope someplace and then figure out, is it really pointing where it's supposed to be pointing? And that's what plate solving does for a living. A meridian flip is different. Now, this picture is a good picture, but it was kind of confusing at first. When you first start out, you're looking up here. Okay, the star's up here someplace. And as the evening wears on, the whole thing rotates around on this axis right here. That's the right ascension axis. And so the whole thing, well, look, it's going to whack into the tripod leg or the big old pier or something like that. So right about when it gets here, everything has to stop. And you've got to turn everything around so that the telescope is now pointed in exactly the same point of the sky out there in Infinity Land. But now it's ready to go the rest of the way without whacking into the tripod again. Okay? That's called a meridian flip. Now, what does the meridian flip do? It seems like it might be pretty simple. After a meridian flip, there are some things that have to be done. For one thing, all your guiding commands are now backwards. Because when you used to tell it to go one direction, if you tell it to go that same direction, well, when everything else is backwards, it's going to go the opposite of where you intended it to go. The second thing is it's got to recenter. That's because there are various problems associated with any construction, even the most expensive of them. Mirror flop is, or focuser sag, or differential flexure. These are all because there are various things hanging off of this system, various weights and stuff like that. There's flexure in everything. Everything moves just a little bit. And remember, you're trying to guide with less than an arc-second accuracy, if you can at all do that. And believe me, a mirror can shift that much, particularly in a Schmidt-Cassegrain. Also in a refractor, things can shift ever so slightly. What was pulling on a camera, you know, it weighs a couple of 3 pounds. It's pulling on a focuser one way. All of a sudden, it's pulling on the focuser the other way. So these are flops and sags and differential flexures that you have to account for. Orthogonality is a little bit different. This axis here and this axis here have to be at 90 degrees from each other, because what the meridian flip does is it just turns everything 90-90. Well, if they aren't at 90 in the first place, you're not pointing at exactly the same place you were pointing beforehand. And that's an issue with orthogonality. And on my mount out in the desert, I have two, I tore up a Coke can, and I've got the width of 2 pieces of Coke can. I would guess in the equivalent of right in here someplace, right there, so that the butt end of this scope comes up just a little bit and changes the axis. That changes the orthogonality, and now when I do a meridian flip, I'm pointing at it's pretty much the same place I was pointing beforehand. All these things have to be fixed. So when you're talking about mount control, you have to, the easy thing, sure, but you've got to get familiar with plate solving and correcting and the meridian flip. This is probably the easiest part of it. You just have to, the automated session requirements, the camera control. Now, using backyard EOS or Canon, the Canon utilities, or nebulosity, or images plus camera control, anything, they've all got some variation thereof for each object that you're looking for. And the simple ones don't care what object you're looking for, so you don't have an entry for that. But for all the other ones, you tell them what type of exposure it's going to be, lights, darks, flats. You tell it what kind of filter you want in there. It gives it a suffix, or you give it a suffix, so that you can name your up here you're naming your information, your files. You tell it how much exposure you want, what binning you want, how many of those pictures you want. That's just camera control, guys, and I'm not going to spend a long time here. There is a little thing that you got to know about that's a little bit different. Do you want to get all your luminance, and then all your R's, and then all your G's, and then all your B's? Or do you want to get an L, an R, a G, a B, an L, an R, a G, a B, an L, an R, a G, and B? This is particularly good because you don't have to refocus a lot. You don't have to, you know you're going to get a good set of data, and things are pretty consistent from one to the next. This is pretty good because if it starts to rain right about here, you've at least got some information already for the night. So you got to make that choice, and on here, right here, finish entire event first or rotate through the events. That's what that question is. That's Sequence Generator Pro's way of doing it. Other software does it in different ways. How are we doing on questions right now? Okay. Under camera control also...
Alex, sorry, it took me a second to get on. We were just chatting in chat. Orthogonality. I think plate solving will compensate for orthogonal error. I think, as far as I understand it.
Yes.
Orthogonal, it might cause pointing error, but then the plate solving compensates.
Yes, but remember, most of our plate solvers need a hint. And if that hint is too far off, it can confuse our plate solvers.
Good point. Good point.
So if you've really got a bad setup in the mount, you're far enough off that you can cause problems with that. Besides that, what I'm saying as far as the mount control and everything else, and how your mount works, and you'll hear this in several points of this presentation, is just get everything working perfectly before you expect some dumb piece of software to do it for you. So if you've got an orthogonality issue, or if you've got any of the other issues, periodic error, any of those kinds of things, fix them. Fix them. Don't expect, hey, Maxim won't even guide, man. I can't get it to guide, man. Every time I try to get it to guide, it screws up. Have you got PhD to guide? No, it screws up too. Have you checked your cable? No. Go check your cable. You got to get everything right before you expect somebody else, some software program to think it out for you. That's what I'm saying. So, okay, any other questions? Okay. Auto guiding, we've all auto guided, I think, and those, we got to remember that yes, many of us have auto guided, but there's also a lot of guys who haven't. There's a lot of guys and girls out there trying to learn this stuff for the first time, and they're coming to these YouTube things saying, "I don't get it at all. Don't talk over my head." And for those of you who know all this stuff, hey, we need to get together someday and maybe talk high-level stuff, and I'll sit there and go, "Hey, don't talk over my head," because you can easily do it with me. Just remember that a lot of people don't know all of the stuff. Your auto guider has to be able to do certain things. Calibration. Speaking of which, it's what is it? 710. I'll do that later. You got to calibrate your auto guider. Sometimes you do that separately from the automated session. Sometimes you do it in the automated session. PhD guiding will actually calibrate itself out of SGP if it has not yet been calibrated. I've seen it do it several times. One of the things that's rather difficult is to select its own star. Not all software guiding programs, not all guiding software will be able to select a star. And remember, after the flip, the star isn't there anymore. The star that it had been using is gone. It's on the other side someplace. It needs to dither. For those of you who are not familiar with it yet, you will become familiar with it yet because it is a good way to get rid of a lot of problems in your hot pixels and things like that in your original data. And that means that you're going to move the camera, just a couple, 2, 3, maybe pixels at most, randomly around so that you don't have, if you've got a bad pixel at location XY, well, XY is someplace else on the next frame, and XY is third place again, and then a fourth place, so it moves around. And so when you go and average out the stack, it gets rid of that noise. That's what dithering is. It's real easy to do with the piece of software. But when it does it, what it's done is basically move everything 2 or 3 pixels, and everything's got to settle back down. So every time you start a new exposure, your software has to know to wait a certain amount of time until things settle back out. Okay? And you can go crazy watching all this stuff, but if you're getting good sharp pictures, run with it, okay? Anyway, by device, you have to have an auto-guiding system that can do this and can do it well. You need a good, sensitive auto-guider because when that, unless you've got a rotator and you've already selected where that next guide star is going to be, it's just taking whatever's up there. And in certain parts of the sky, there's not much up there. M81, M82, it's hard to find a guide star unless you've got a good camera. Okay, and that's another part where make sure that everything is good, everything works before you expect some piece of software to do it for you. Focusing, there are various software focusing programs, and they all work. They have all got different algorithms and stuff like that, but basically they do the same thing you did when you first looked at the moon through somebody's telescope. You started moving one way as it got sharper until it stopped getting sharp and started getting fuzzy again, and then you move back and forth until you found it where it was. Well, that's what these fancy programs do. They take a picture and they see what the half flux radius, in this case I think it's half flux radius, that means basically how wide is the star. And they take another picture and it's either skinnier or it's fatter. Then they take another picture and another picture and another picture and another picture and another picture until they've taken a bunch of pictures, and wherever it's the skinniest, that's where the best focus is. Focus Max, which is over here, does a very good job. It runs, you first have to configure it by running a series of focusing V-curves, and then it can take 2 or 3 spots on this graph by taking various exposures, and it can jump to where that exposure should be. It also does other things, like it moves the telescope around to find the ideal focusing star and things like that. You have to focus initially, and most of these programs, you have to get it kind of in focus before you've even started the evening. Now, my stuff's set up for years in the same position and everything else like that. So unless, like tonight, I've actually changed my camera around and stuff like that. Oh, that reminds me, I got to check, make sure that when that starts. What time is it supposed to start? 7:20? Okay. I usually check that when I move my camera around. Anyway, you got to get a good initial exposure or good initial focus, and then for some telescopes in particular, mine aren't too bad. When the temperature changes, it's got to change. For some, when the filter changes, it's got to change, and your system's got to know how to do that. There are 2 kinds of focusers out there, 2 generic classes of focusers. One uses a stepper motor. It says move exactly 1 step and another and another, and it knows exactly how far each of those steps is, and it counts them as it goes. The other is a direct drive or a DC motor, and it gives a bunch of power in a smooth, kind of like an analog curve, and that moves it for a certain amount of time, moves the motor for a certain amount of time. But whether that translates directly into movement on the focusing tube or not, it's hard to say. This says go for 1/10 of a second. This one says go for 12 steps. Okay? This is an absolute focuser. It knows exactly where it is all the time. This is a relative focuser. It knows where it told itself to go. And the difference is this one can actually focus using those graphs, using these graphs here. These are focusing positions. These are actually counts coming out of the focuser. All right, same thing here. These are very specific points. Okay, whereas this one can't give you a specific point. It can only tell you how much work it's done. It can't tell you what that work has gotten it. You're going to need an absolute focuser eventually. Some people say the relative focusers work, and if they do for you, all the more power to you. But this is a game where, you know, you got to have stuff that really, really works reliably time after time. By device, we get to observatory control. Now, I must admit, I don't know much about observatory control because I don't need it. I've got a roll-off roof or a roll-off shed back there. But I just thought this was cool, this big old set of buttons over here. These are all the things that these guys have to do, particularly the top part, to control the telescope. I mean, it gets really complicated. And this is a Boltwood, I think, a weather sensor, and it looks up, and it's got, see this tells it what the wind speed is, this little gold thing. If I put the word sensor in there, and this is taking a picture to sense whether the clouds are up and the moisture and stuff like that. And you see these very, very well engineered spikes coming up. They're there to keep the birds off. Anyway, I just thought that was really cool. I don't have to worry about this because I'm at home. I can see it, and it's not going to rain on me. How are we doing on questions? Okay?
Alex, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
On the absolute focusers, well, the Moonlight focuser, for example, with the stepper motor, once you set your curves and your focus positions, do you actually have to be taking images to focus anymore at that point? Or if you know what your offsets are, can you just base where your focus point is on the temperature from then on out?
I'm getting a lot of feedback, but both temperature and filter change. If you know what 1 degree temperature does as far as this goes, you don't have to refocus. You don't have to take another picture to do anything. Once you're focused and you know that 1 degree of temperature drop means that your tube is going to shrink by 4 steps, you can just sense the temperature and move it. Same thing with filter change. If you've got a set of filters and you know that your luminance focuses at 1597, say, but your blue always focuses 4 steps further out, well, you better put it at 1601. So you can skip, you can use what's called filter offsets. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers most of it. I guess the other question I have on that is the temperature offset, is that all linear? Can you just assume?
I don't know. I don't have, what I make it a point to do is focus every hour no matter what. I basically focus every filter change, and I run my filters. I generally will gather an hour's worth of data on any one set of filter, on any one filter. Does that make sense to you? So
Yes.
I don't need to check the temperature. I don't need to check which filter's in there. I put the filter in, and I say focus for whatever temperature it is, and it's not going to change another, that much that quickly. You see what I mean? So, but other people are more sophisticated. They've got temperature sensors on their telescope, and I've gone through my filters, and I've actually studied by taking a series of exposures on all my filters, finding out where they focus, and yeah, mine are parfocal filters. They're within the critical focus zone. If one of them focuses at 1597, the other two will be between about 1595 up to 1599, and they'll change back and forth. Which one's where will change. So they're essentially parfocal. Okay, so I don't have to worry about that much. But when I change filters, it's just time to change. It's just time to refocus. Okay. Do you need whoop, where are we? I'm getting dizzy. Slaving. So that's making sure that your telescope, your observatory shutter is pointing the same way your telescope is. Everything's got to be hooked together in that. And the imaging programs I'm talking about generally can do this. Okay, takes care of all this stuff. Now there's another device you may or may not have. Rotation is important, and so you might need a rotator. I don't have a rotator because it's just one more complication in my life that I just haven't gotten around to learning how to use. Do you want to take a picture like this or like this? Both beautiful pictures, but which one did you want to take today? Well, you can do one of two things. One is you can grab your camera and rotate it to whichever orientation you want. You can set your camera up so that it gets whichever one you want. Or you can tell an automation program to do it for you. But to do that, you're going to need a rotator in the system. It's important for composition then. So if you're going to automate a session where you might want to change how you compose your picture, how the California nebula is stretched out across the frame, or how the veil is it going to go diagonal across the frame, or is it going to go straight across the frame? What's it going to do? If you want to change that, if you're not there to rotate the camera physically, and remember, you're asleep if everything's working out for you, then you got to have a rotator. There's another very, very good reason for having a rotator. if you've got a QSI 583 where the off-axis guider, WSG, the off-axis guider is in a set position relative to the imaging chip, and you don't have a particularly sensitive guide camera, then you need to pick where your guide star is going to be. And it looks like you got a whole lot of choices here as to where you put the guide star. But you can see this little guiding area here. Okay, that's why it's pointed there. See this little arrow? That's to mark that this is where your guide star is going to be. And you may have to rotate it, like up by M81, M82, and in various other relative sparse parts of the sky with a not very good guider, not very sensitive guider. You may have a problem getting to where you want to go unless you can rotate. Okay, so there's a couple of reasons to have rotators. I don't have that problem. My lodestar can pretty much pull in whatever pull in a guide star no matter where I point. So I don't usually have a problem with that. Okay, there's extras too. Okay, those are we just went through a list of the different kinds of devices and special requirements that might be in automated imaging. Now we go to some of the extras that you can find in all of the programs. You can add to the programs, you know, something like that. Obviously, you saw VNC Viewer in action. I sit here at my desk and I watch what's happening on my laptop if I want to. You can also get PhD, for instance, to mail you, oh my God, help, guide star has been lost, you better do something. Now, why would a guide star be lost? Either because the telescope didn't point where it was supposed to, or what I did the other day, remember when I took that dust cover off the top of my telescope and tossed it on the chair? Well, that particular night I had tossed it on the little shelf near the water cooler, and somehow or another it got caught on the counterweight. And so it lost its guide star when the dust cloth grabbed the counterweight and wouldn't let it move anymore, which is kind of like really bad guiding. So you can get PhD Mailer to send you an email when your guide star is lost. And incidentally, this will also send you a text message on your cell phone. So you can be sitting there, oh, something's wrong with my star. I got to go in the backyard and figure out what's wrong with it. Remember, the first sign of trouble is that you've lost your guide star. Something is not where it belongs. Some of these can take flats. CCD Commander, I think it is, does just a wonderful job of taking flats. CCD Autopilot does too. Sequence Generator Pro does only if you've got a flip, you know, one of those, flip flat, yeah, that's what they're called. Or in my case, I bought some, I use an iPad at home, and out in the desert, I bought a LCD panel, not an LCD panel, whatever they are, light emitting panel. So I got one of those, and I did that this morning too. Some of them will take, a lot of them will take darks. They'll all take darks because they're just a different type of exposure. Some of them that will evaluate your images and tell you which ones came out good. Some of them keep track of your half flux radius, which tells you whether you're staying in focus. Some of them will tell you how much time you should take for your next exposure. Okay, they've all got a lot of features, and you could go through them on all that and other thing, or you could. Well, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's get some summary stuff here. You also need a computer. It's not usually much of a computer. Almost anything XP or above will work pretty good. It's nice to have a big hard drive so you can keep all your images on it, but some people use not offline storage, they use USB drives, and some people, there's all sorts of ways. It's really not all that demanding. It is nice to have lots of USB ports native to the system. All right? If you've got serial ports, even cooler, but lots of USB ports. And always, particularly in this communication stuff, get really the goodest stuff you can get, if at all. All right? Get stuff that's reliable. I have good luck with the Keyspan products and the RS-232 converters. There's a lot of this equipment actually works on RS-232 communication, and you need good, reliable USB to RS-232 converters. We're going to talk more especially about wiring and cabling and some other stuff. Oh, we're there. It's time to go. Here's my mount out in the desert. You'll notice that there's wires down here, and it comes through. There's only one cable wire coming up, and it connects to here. This is coming through. This is the deck cable. It's part of the this is the deck cable. But here's all my imaging stuff. It comes up, and it's fastened right here. It's actually attached to where the polar alignment scope would go if I had a polar alignment scope. And then it comes, there's just enough wiggle room here to make sure that it can go all the way around, back and forth to wherever this scope can go, but there's no more than that. Then it's attached up to here on a flexible attachment, and there's just enough loop here to get from here to there, so this axis can go from here to there, and that's about all there is. There's no other place to get messed up. Then this whole thing is attached with a screw to the side of the camera, and attached to here. There's only this much room, only this much slack to get from here to there, and everything's just got that much. By the way, that's not exactly true. One of these two cables went out, and now I've got a whole bunch of looped up cable up there right now, which I got to fix next time I go out. The backside doesn't have to be quite so clean because the backside isn't going through all this motion. But it is absolutely essential that you have secure cables that cannot tangle on themselves and that you regularly inspect them. There was not too long ago a thread about on Cloudy Nights about why Sequence Generator Pro wasn't guiding, and I was so frustrated with it, and I'm going to, you know, and this and that, the other thing. And the man, with all due respect, I felt bad for him. He kept going on and on about how bad it was. And I talked to him, and he says, yeah, you know, I mean, like, this cable wouldn't work, and then that cable wouldn't work, and then my mount wouldn't attach right. And guys, that's not Sequence Generator Pro screwing up. That's not your session manager screwing up. That's the cable screwing up, and it would be screwing up no matter what. So you've got to get it working. You can't fault the session manager, the piece of software, because your cables got tangled and everything else. I can tell you that virtually every time I have a problem getting something to work, I've got to check the cables, and 90% of the time. And matter of fact, Craig Stark, I was talking to him at a presentation he did, and he had about 3 or 4 guys asking him such and so and such about why PhD won't guide for him. He says, did you check the cable? That's the way he always starts the questioning. Did you replace the cable? Okay, so always check them out. Get them inspected. The rest of that stuff's kind of neat. All these are plugged into what are these called? Keystone jacks? I forget what they're called. And then it goes down underneath. It comes all over to this wall, and here's a detail of the wall where they all come out. And that's the other thing I wanted to tell you. Okay, so keep your cable straight. The device manager, he is your friend. Okay, the device manager, if you do not know about the device manager, and anybody who's worked with this stuff for a while knows it already. In your various, this is a Windows 7, I think, but in XP it looks pretty much the same. You pull up your start. Over here you get your control panel. You go to devices and printers, and you go to your device manager. From your device manager, they have all of the different devices out here. You need to learn how to use this particular piece of Windows whenever you are having a configuration problem. Whenever something's not working and something's not communicating, the device manager is your best friend. So get to know how to use the device manager to check to see, is my keyspan USB serial port even connected? And it's supposed to be on COM 2, and I told my Gemini controller that it was out on COM 4. Well, you better fix that, because otherwise it simply won't work. Is my Lodestar actually showing up under the block I/O devices, and is my QSI camera actually showing up under the imaging devices? Learn how to use your device manager if you don't already know. There's another thing that can be mystifying to people, and that's called ASCOM. ASCOM is a translating language. It's a layer that any vendor, whatever they're selling, can write something that communicates to ASCOM. ASCOM can then communicate that information back out to all the supported devices. So if you're writing a piece of software here, all you've got to do is say something in ASCOM. ASCOM translates it to what it means to the supporting devices. So the manufacturers out here and the software programmers up here, they don't have to be speaking exactly the same language each time. There's a common translator. It's essential that you keep your ASCOM up to date. Having said that, it's also essential to realize that sometimes they goof. This is a free program here, okay? And sometimes they goof, and there are some things that there are known flaws in some of the ASCOM stuff. But you're going to have to download ASCOM, get the stuff that's related to your particular devices out here, something that'll communicate to your Canon or your QSI or your SPIG, and you're going to have to do that. So get that, get it straight in your computer, keep it up to date as much as you can, okay? Here are some old man advices. If you've got 3 or 4 USB cords going into your computer, always plug to play them the same way. My camera, the QSI, its cable is labeled 1 up at the QSI. It comes down through whatever system it is, and just before it goes into the computer, there's a little piece of blue masking tape on it, and it says 1. And it always goes into port number 1, which is the first port on the left side of the computer. The guider is always number 2. Number 3 is the autofocuser, and number 4 comes around the back side to my 4th USB port. And it always goes in the same way. When I take it away someplace, I very rarely take that I very rarely have to disconnect that laptop in the back. The one that goes out in the desert, I have to, I bring it home all the time. But it's always push number 1 in, number 2, number 3, number 4, always the same way. Maybe it's superstition, but when I didn't used to do it, I used to have problems losing track of which device was out where, and I'd have to go to the device manager and stuff like that. Separate ports if you've got them. If you can have 4 ports in your laptop, great. If you can't, think out which are your high data demands and which are your low data demands. Your mount really doesn't take much. Your auto guider is putting down information a lot. It's always dumping down these pictures and stuff like that. So think all that out. There are a lot of people, believe me, there are a lot of people who get by with 4-port hubs, 8-port hubs and stuff like that, and more power to them. My imaging source camera simply will not work unless it's got a hub all by itself and it's less than 15 feet away. Otherwise, it just won't work. You're going to get to learn all that stuff. These are, like I said, old man pieces of advice. I'm going to emphasize again that you have to have very good cable management in an automated setup. And I'm going to emphasize again, each device, every function that you've got must be able to work. You've got to be able to do a meridian flip. You've got to be able to do a plate solve all by yourself without the software manager having any influence on it before you ask the software manager, SGP Pro or Maxim or anything else to do it for you. Many of us have different scopes, different mounts, different cameras that we plug in back and forth. There's this thing in almost all of these systems called configurations. And it's good to keep your configurations separate. When I'm out imaging with my DSLR, I've got one DSLR configuration, and it's the DSLR for GMARS, which is the name of my desert observatory site. That's my club's observatory site out there. It's the GMARS site or it's the home site, okay? Use your configurations as much as you can. And remember, what's a problem in one program may not be the problem in the program. It may be a program and it may be a problem someplace completely different. You have to really sometimes go slowly, work it out what's happening. I remember in CCD Commander, I was telling it to take sky flats. It does a great, once I got it to work, it did a great job taking sky flats, but I couldn't get it to work. Why couldn't I get it to work? Because every morning I'd go out there and it would say, okay, I'm waiting for sunrise in order to take flats. I go, okay, but the sun's up, dummy. And I couldn't figure that out. And nothing I could do in CCD Commander seemed to make any sense. It turns out that over in the Sky X, there is a setting under Options, the second page of Advanced Options, and you've got to scroll down about at least a screen and a half before there's something like turn off serial communications while sleeping. So in other words, the Sky was never telling CCD Commander what time it was that the sun was coming up. So CCD Commander was happily just waiting for a command that said the sun's up, or sun's coming up in 8 minutes, time to take your flats, and it was never getting there. Once I checked that box, man, I took wonderful flats without ever having to wake up for them. Okay? So an apparent problem in one program may really be off in another one. Get yourself a good camera with a motorized filter wheel if you're going to need filters. A good guider system with a sensitive camera, a good go-to mount that you've really gotten to work really well, a motorized absolute focuser, and a good kick-around computer. You might need a rotator. You might need to motorize your dome or your roof. You might need a weather sensor and a flip flat to help to take the flats. But if you've got this stuff here, you can take automated sessions. Now you're asking, which of these should you buy? Just take a look at that for a minute. I've kind of eliminated some stuff that I frankly don't need, and that's from my perspective. If I had a observatory someplace 2 states away on the top of a mountain, and I had spent $30,000 on stuff, hey, I think I'd have more columns here to worry about, but I don't. I'm either out in the desert, out with my Dob, like I was last night, trying to get my Caldwell objects, my big old 15-inch Dob, while my computer was running the session in my observatory, or I'm sitting here watching football and goofing around and sleeping while my system is in my backyard doing this. So I don't need to worry about observatory control so much, so I didn't put that column in. Another reason I didn't put them in, because they've all got it, kind of. You've got to check to see which one actually has it, which one doesn't. Let's now that you've had a chance to kind of look through all that stuff, some of these programs don't do what you need to do to get going anyway. You know, Sky X, for instance, as expensive as it is, doesn't flip. This, however, I mean, this is interesting, this money. All right? This, however, is the kicker. CCD Commander, where is that? $99. Very good program. He does a great job. It's easy to understand, easy to work, pretty reliable, everything else like that. But to work it, you also have to buy Maxim for what's $4.99 or so, or CCD Soft, which is kind of getting, you know, they don't do that much anymore. Pinpoint, you can't use the Pinpoint that's in Maxim. You have to buy a separate full license on Pinpoint, which is $165, or maybe, I really don't know anymore, but it's up there. And Sky X, which is, or you can have Sky X, one of those two, and that's another what, $350 or $250? I don't really know, because it's, I mean, I've paid for it and everything. I just don't remember what it is. So yeah, these prices are interesting, but when you add this to it, it's going to cost you $500-600 to automate with anything, except perhaps Sequence Generator Pro. I mean, really automated. These guys are really good. I mean, Mike Unsold's a wonderful person, and so is Craig Stark. They're both really good guys. And and we met Ghislaine just the other day, or just a couple of weeks back. So we all know these are great people. They do good things, and I love my backyard EOS, but they don't manage my whole session for me. The guys at Sequence Generator Pro, they also are good people, and so is Doug George, and so is all. Okay, that's enough of that. you might need to buy a plate solver, or you might be happy with the free plate solvers. I don't really know. I use PixInsight because I bought PixInsight back when I was experimenting with these other ones. So I had PixInsight, and it's the gold standard in that regard. So I didn't go buying a new. I didn't have to go with Albus or Astro Tortilla. And somebody out there is about to pipe in with how they work, I hope. Anyway, that's why I wound up with Sequence Generator Pro. And before we go there, let's just leave that there, and this is a good place for questions. Anybody got any?
We are just chatting about what SGP uses for plate solving. Josh had asked, can't SGP use Astro Tortilla? And SGP, when you set up the local solving as the fallback solving, or whatever they refer to it as, it can use the Astro Tortilla files. You use the Astro Tortilla install, get the files onto your computer, and it local solves via that. So if that's what you were asking about how that works, that's how it works with SGP at least. Also Elbrus, which is free, and Pinpoint, which costs money.
Yeah. And I just know mine works just fine, and I've never really had to go off to the free ones. Had I known about the free ones, or had I gotten the Sequence Generator Pro, not having already bought Pinpoint for Autopilot and CCD Commander, I might not have ever bought Pinpoint. Does anybody know about Max Pilot? I mean, you can see, I can't even tell from the website some of the details I was looking up for you guys. I can't even tell. I've used this one. I have not used Nebulosity. Images Plus I've used a lot in the olden days. I have used SkyXC. I've got that on one of my laptops. Maxim I used a lot. CCD Autopilot I used. CCD Commander I used. Sequence Generator Pro is what I use. This is the program that Mike Miller was raving about a month ago or so on the Astro Imaging channel. Max Pilote does nominally the same stuff. I just don't know much about it.
Alex, is Pinpoint a blind solving program?
Pardon me?
Does Pinpoint solve, can it do blind solves?
Yes, Pinpoint in itself will do plate solving. Is that what you're asking? I'm getting a lot of echo for some reason. Pinpoint does plate solving. Like you can take any old image and drag it over there and say, hey, solve this for me. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, sort of. Some of them can do blind plate solving where...
Oh, yeah, it does the blind plate solving.
Okay.
Well, actually, all blind plate solving goes off on the internet, I think. No, I guess it doesn't. I very rarely have to go to blind plate solving, so I'm not too familiar with it. You know, when you're in a fixed observatory with the same equipment over and over again, if you pointed to the first star and it's in the field of view, and mine is, you just don't go blind much. You know, blind plate solving, for those of you who are asking, when you tell something to go, when you tell the software to go plate solve, you tell it where you think that image is. It actually gets it out of the FITS header file, or you type in a hint location. And so that's where it starts searching that database. And it actually, from what I've been told, I don't know how magically it can do this, but it knows relationships of sets of stars all through the celestial sphere. And it just sees which one seems to match most of them most of the time. It identifies the matches, it identifies the angles on your pictures, and then goes out and tries to find a match of that database out there. So you can put all of that database on your computer by downloading some software from Elbrus and Astro Tortilla. You can do that, but it's a lot of work, and it's really intensive stuff. Well, if the plate solve does not work with the hints that you've given it, it doesn't seem to find enough matches, it'll go off into this huge database and just say, okay, come on, let's find it. And it can go off for quite some time looking for these things, because there's a lot of stars out there and any 3 stars have angles between them. And by the way, whoever's out there that's listening to this that actually knows how plate solvers work, you're welcome to do a whole presentation on it for us, because I think it's got to be fascinating. I just asked that question once, and somebody explained it, and then they referred me to some scientific literature about how to do it, and I got about 4 pages into it, and that was about it. Anyway.
Alex, can I just pipe in real quick? I think that the reason I was asking is, I mean, if you're using an astrophysics mount, then I don't blind plate solving maybe is not that important when you're using like an atlas and you have a lot of backlash and you flip the meridian, you might be off by a couple of degrees, and that's where that blind plate solving usually will be more helpful, which is what Astro Tortilla does, which is why I was asking if it would use that or not.
Do you have to have internet connection for that?
No.
Okay.
It's all done locally. They have all the directories downloaded to the desktop or to the laptop that I use.
How long would it take you on average to do a blind plate solve?
30 seconds.
Okay.
That's including solving and then slewing and then solving again.
Okay. Now, obviously, I'm a fan of Sequence Generator Pro.
Alex, can I interrupt you one more time? Dylan O'Donnell's asking a question. Apart from cables, what sort of issues can occur that ruin your night's imaging? Do you ever check the data as it arrives early in the night, or do you just let it do its thing and watch and collect it in the morning?
What I do? Oh, star did not move enough. Okay. Yeah. For instance, I'm just checking right now. I've still got my screen share, and remember, I started my my calibration there earlier. Well, see, I'm looking at tight VNC. The screen that you see here is now actually the screen out on my laptop in the backyard, and yeah, I don't know what I did, but you can see that it should be. It's getting distance 0, west step 5, still 0, 0, 0. So obviously I'm not going anywhere. So I don't know what's wrong out there. Did I forget to connect something? I took the whole camera and the guider and everything out to the desert with me, which as I always do. And when I brought it back, I may not have reconnected something. So at any rate,
maybe a hot pixel?
Now, what was that question? It was a very interesting question. Do I ever monitor? Yeah, actually, remember I pointed to my couch over there at the end of one of the videos? The desktop is sitting opposite the couch, and I can look around the room, look across the room, and first off on Sequence Generator Pro, let me
Alex, you're guiding on a hot pixel. Your other stars are moving, but your guide star isn't.
Okay. Yeah. Well, see, and I would have noticed that had I not been trying to talk at the same time. This is what Sequence Generator Pro generally looks like. I'm going to open an image here someplace. What do I have? A 7. Oh, that's a sorry. That's a flat frame. You probably don't want to see that. Open an image. See, I'm actually going back to the back one and back there. This is my calibration stuff, and let's see, M2. Did I take a picture of M2? Okay, I guess I must have taken a picture of M2 lately. So typically, as I'm sitting over on my other side of my desk, I will have I'll have that showing. And I might have this showing that right there. Okay? So I can see, I actually don't have this one I'm moving around right now. I don't generally have this up because it's too far away to see. But I can tell if this is getting too blue or too red, this thing here, that my guiding's going goofy. And these will have green bars across them depending on how much I've done for the night. Okay, so I can And I could tell that nothing is happening right now. So I say, hey, I told you to start at 7:30. What the H is wrong with you? So I'll come back over here and I'll go, that's a hot pixel. Well, that's one heck of a hot pixel there, Coach. But let's try. Are we still looping? Let's try that one. You wake up. Let's try calibrating. I mean, I love y'all, you know, but I want to image tonight too, so I might as well take some moments out now and then to get my own stuff going. Anyway, I can see this across
me,
the room.
Alex.
Pardon?
It was starting to bother me.
Okay. I can see this across the room. And so remember, it's only every half hour that a narrowband image comes down for me. And so I can see if anything's going goofy. But remember, I'm over there watching TV or doing something else, and this may not be up, or it may be up, but it's proven so reliable, so long, there's just not much to see. You know, there's not much going wrong. You know, how often do you check your tires anymore? They just don't go flat that often. You should check them once a month, and yeah, I do check my session once every couple of hours or something, but then I go to bed, and seriously, it runs by itself from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and I don't check it. Okay, if you want to see how to set up and run Sequence Generator Pro, you can go to alexastro.com. And you can forget about that part because alexastro.com will have a whole bunch of stuff. And go to the articles link. And under the articles link, you will find the Sequence Generator Pro tutorial. It's called Your First Week with Sequence Generator Pro. And it takes a different approach than most software tutorials take. Most software tutorials are very linear. They say, do this, then this, then this, then this, then this, now push the button and it should all work. I took a different approach. I said, do this and don't do anything else. Is it working? Now do this. Add it to what you did yesterday. Is everything still working? And I added a layer after layer after layer, and I called it 7 days of, you know, step by step. But it is important, I think, when you're doing session automation. I've said it before, you've heard it before, I hate to bore you, but you got to know it. Everything's got to work first before you go on to the next step. All your equipment's got to work, it's got to have the periodic error, you got to get the junk out of your system first before you expect the software to handle it for you. Okay, with that in mind, oh yeah, turn on the PowerPoint, silly. First thing you got to do is you got to configure your camera. See, this is no camera, no filter wheel. It doesn't know what the heck's happening. So you're going to make a configuration. And under Tools, you can open up the Profile Manager, or you can click that button right there, the Camera Manager, and you can define everything. But look how many things there are to define. All these things have to be defined, and then there are sub-steps under some of these things where you have to go to define other things. Now, some of these you can get by without defining them, but you're going to regret it later. All right? After you've defined it, then you go over and you see, does my camera work? And then you see these different tabs. You got to set up all these different questions, and some of them can be kind of complicated. All right? For instance, for setting up focus, I've got to tell it it's going to be a RoboFocus. I got to tell her, oh, first off, I've got to check which configuration I'm using. Is this the DSLR out at GMARS, or is it the QSI out at GMARS? Now, I should say earlier when I was saying the configurations, you probably know by now that I'm not all that bright and don't remember stuff that well. I actually have 2 laptops. One goes out to the desert, and the other stays here in the outhouse. And that really simplifies configuration problems because I don't have to worry about confusing which tube, which mount, and stuff like that I'm using. Okay, but these are all questions that have to be answered. So you click on focus, you tell it certain things, then you say use autofocus. Okay, set the autofocus, and this whole nother screen comes up. Now, where do you get the information for all this stuff? First off, you have to figure out what your system does. And there is a very good manual in Sequence Generator Plus. Pro, and it'll teach you. It'll tell you what those things are, but you do have to read it, and you do have to make it pay attention. You do have to pay attention to it, and then you have to try it out. And what I strongly suggest, if you listen to what I said earlier about my philosophy of teaching on that stuff, get the first part of it working before you go to the second part. Because if you try to get it all set up in one night and then all use it, you'll find out you won't know which part of it's screwing up. Get one part of it working before you get to the next. What is this part? Oh, then you got to define a target. All right, after you've defined what your equipment is, you got to define a target. So you click on that little cog right there, and you tell it what, and you got to tell it where the target is. You got to tell it that you want to center on. Generally, you're going to center on. Center is as opposed to slew. Slew just means move to the area as well as you can. Center on means move to the area as well as you can, and then we're going to check to make sure that it really is where you think it is. That's what centering is. And then you got to, and you can actually go plate solving and find the area that you want, and you can put stuff in that way. I almost always, if you were here last week, you saw my little book, and it tells me what the right ascension and declination are. I almost always just put in the RA and dec of where I want it to go, rather than this stuff over here. But you can use this stuff. This is more advanced. Then you go and connect your devices. You click on each of these 4 little doodads over here, and it'll turn everything on. And you program your session. By programming your session, remember earlier I said that you have to tell it that you want a light, a luminance, 60-second, 1-by-1 binning, and I want 5 of them, etc., all the way through. And you can have, I don't know how many you can have. You can have a poop load of them, though. You can have, I think, 30 targets up here, 31 maybe targets, or maybe they've removed that limitation. Just a little, when I was trying to get all 110 Messier objects in one night, I asked if I could do it, and they said, nope, you can't do that because it's got I think 31 targets you could put in there. But you can put a whole lot of events in. You can add a new event. Oh, I forget. I'm not actually looking at Sequence Generator Pro. I'm just looking at a PowerPoint picture of it. So you have to program the session. That's the same thing as you're doing in Backyard EOS or anything like that. Then you go over and get PhD guiding going. And then you tell it to run. And when it runs, it goes and it takes a picture. It sees where it's supposed to be, or it sees where it is. It slews to where it's supposed to be, takes another picture, checks to see if it's really there, and it corrects and corrects and corrects until, in fact, it's there, or at least up to 5 attempts. And or you can tell it how many attempts you want. The other day I was trying to do something silly, and I said, okay, just within 20 pixels. By the way, there are some 3,000 pixels across here, so within 20 pixels is awfully precise. But I actually make it go to 3 pixels, and it very rarely does anything but gets there like it should. So it goes and does that, and then it comes over and it focuses for me because I told it to focus every time it changes filters. And what it does is it takes the pictures and it tells you how big everything is getting. And anyway, for hours it ran and it ran and it ran. And here's this error recovery. Remember that I told you about the big view? I can see this across the room. This pops up on the screen. I can tell that, something bad happened. It can be something dumb, like my dust cover grabbing my counterweight bar, or it could be something serious like a cloud rolling in. If it's a cloud rolling in, it's going to roll out. So what this does is it waits every, 10 minutes, I think it is. I'm not sure I can configure that, but it waits a certain amount of time, and it says, okay, now can I see a cloud? Now can I see my stars? If it can see the stars, it says, okay, I'm back to work. It repositions itself with the plate solving, reacquires the guide star, and starts, and it'll do that. It'll try, I think, 15 times. I think it'll go, well, an hour 29:55. So it'll go 90 minutes. Of trying, and then it'll say, no, this is a bad night, and it shuts itself off. Then you come back the next morning and you tell it to shut down. However you tell it to shut down, just like you saw me do in the picture this morning. And your favorite part, my last words, the session manager isn't necessarily what's not working. If something's not working, check everything, including those cables again. And I'm going to say it one last time, everything must work first. Everything in the system's got to work all by itself with you controlling it before you expect the software session manager to work, make it work. Obviously, that's the end of my prepared remarks, so who's got something they want to say? Questions? Answers? Where'd my screens share?
I'll reiterate something you said about Device Manager. Device Manager is great because if you are 50 feet or 100 feet away from your gear and you don't necessarily want to touch it, you can enable and disable a device right from your remote computer, and that'll save you 90% of the time. I also wanted to go back. Josh talked about temperature compensation versus focusing using images, and from what I've heard, using the images is just better. There is some kind of differential between the actual temperature, and the temperature that the tube is chasing. So, kind of like the difference between auto-guiding with and without PEM. You're kind of chasing it, so if you can, by using the images, you're more closely ahead of it.
And that's what I do. I just refocus every hour, no matter what, using the images. It takes very little time. And besides, you're asleep. It doesn't matter really about the time as much anymore.
Better to have fewer images in focus.
Yeah.
I have a specific question about power supplies. Do you guys do anything to regulate the voltage that's coming in, or do you just plug in straight off of your AC power supply?
Out in the desert, I use a amateur radio regulated power supply, and it feeds my mount, my camera, and everything else that runs on 12 volts in the observatory. Out here, I use a pyramid supply bought by the G11 that runs the G11, and I use a separate wall wart that came with the QSI, and they're all plugged into a simple power strip. That's what I do.
Yeah, I'm similar. I have a pyramid power supply that actually just runs my mount, and then I have a 12-volt battery that runs my dew heater, and what else does it run? My focuser, and then my camera runs off AC for right now, and when I'm remote, it runs off a battery. I don't bother regulating my camera, although I probably should, but I never bought. Well, I have a battery to run it, but never really got around. I actually don't have a DC kit for my camera, so need to get that first.
DC kit for your camera? What's that mean?
Like SBIG sells a DC adapter so you could run your camera off DC. My camera runs off AC. I have an AC plug for my camera right now.
Okay. Don't they all run off 12 volts?
4 volt?
Aren't they all?
Canons run off of 7 volts.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this is for my SBIG. This is for the CCD.
I see that Sean asked, how do I make sure that I'm not guiding on a hot pixel? Like tonight, you saw where did I ever get this regulated? I'm not screen sharing anymore, am I? Tonight, I was guiding it, but you saw what I was doing. I was just clicking on something. Usually, I don't calibrate, but about twice a month I have to calibrate, because when I take my camera out to the desert on the dark weekends, is the only time I have to recalibrate when I get home because I've moved the camera around. And otherwise, you know, PhD2 just remembers what you're calibrated at, and I don't need to calibrate. I don't know how it decides what not to pick a hot pixel. I can tell you that I have a set of dark frames in PhD, and it knows to use the dark frames to remove hot pixels and things like that. I don't seem to have much problem with guiding. My graphs don't look good, but my stars look okay. You know, I come in with anywhere from 0.4 to 0.6 to 0.8 RMS arc seconds errors, which I think is pretty good for you know, when you get down to it. But my graphs don't look pretty, but the the stars are okay, I think. So I don't have a good answer for you there. Was it Josh or Sean?
Sean.
Sean. Okay. Okay. Now I gotta get my session started. So you guys talk among yourselves. Oh, silence.
Tim S is asking, would this work for remotely powering anything in the observatory? And it looks like a rack mount power system, and it seems like it could. I actually came across this one product called the High-Tech Astro Mount Hub Pro, and I'm infatuated with this product. It looks like it does everything that we would possibly need to do. It has a 12-volt USB on it. It can actually be mounted on your telescope, so you could get off by running only 2 wires, your power and your single USB. Seems awesome. Called them about it. They're overseas. They don't sell it to the U.S. because it's not FCC regulated or whatever it might be. So, but I think there are people who will send it here, and it's relatively reasonable. I'd look into that. The only problem with the rack mount systems is where you're going to put it. Like, it's a pretty big piece of kit to just kind of hang off of a pier. This High-Tech Astro thing is like, I think it's 12 by 4 or something like that, or 7 by 4. It's pretty cool. I think actually Warren Keller might use one on his remote setup. But worth taking a look at and seeing if you can get into this country somehow. Some discussions that we had in chat were on Astro Tortilla, and there are some good tutorials on Light Vortex Astro, on Storage Force. You can probably Google them, because I've come across both of these just by simple Googling, but if you get your plate solving working, your life's just become a lot easier.
One of the things I've noticed about plate solving is sometimes you just have to grab an old image or something that you already know the plates, the answers to, and make sure that it's exact, and get that to plate solve in whatever plate solving software you're using to verify that you haven't changed binning or something silly like that. And some of these things just mystifying you, how you keep butting your head up against it and you can't figure out what's happened, and you don't realize that, oh, I changed that column, didn't I? So you have to just take an old picture that you have and see if it still works on that before you go any further.
And that question stemmed, I'm sorry, the remote power stemmed from how do you turn on a DSLR remotely? And that was actually one of the things that pushed me towards a CCD, and I'm still not turning on my CCD remotely. I'm still walking out and plugging in. But I think you do need some sort of remote power switch. The cheapest ones I've seen, there are Wi-Fi power switches that are very residential, and I'm not going to say they're bulletproof in any way. I forget the names of them, but they're like something Wii. I think they sell them in Lowe's or Home Depot or one of those. And they're at least easy enough to find, and they're Wi-Fi, so it's pretty much plug and play. about as easy as it gets. But that's a plug and play usually isn't bulletproof, so depends on how many steps to your observatory, I guess. Anyone else have any questions? Just going through. I think we covered all the questions. Going back to Google to see if anybody else may have commented.
I have one question. So I am aware of an observatory that only has an ISDN line at the location. Is that sufficient bandwidth to be able to automate things in this manner, or do you have to have higher bandwidth to be able to do this?
Remember, the only communication you're getting back and forth is about the equivalent of an Internet Explorer or something. A tight VNC is in my case going back. That's the only thing actually going back and forth. Now, if my computer back there were in fact in New Mexico, then at some point I would have to say, let's download everything that it took last night and get it back over here. Now, how long would it take to download that much information? I don't know. But the actual, I use my cell phone on 3G to monitor what's going on. The software that I was demonstrating today is working the same way as if I was sitting there looking at it. I mean, it's a laptop connected with USB cables to the mount and camera and everything else. There's no communications going back and forth. The fact that I came into the house and started looking at what was on that laptop, that's the only communication that needs to go remote.
So 768K would be enough? Would say like 100 millisecond delay would be enough to be able to use an automated session remotely?
The automated session software would be on the remote computer.
Oh, I get it, and all you're doing is monitoring it.
Yeah, all you're doing is watching it. I'm watching your face going, oh, I get it right now, and I'm watching your face going, oh, yeah. See? But that's all I'm doing. I'm watching your face.
It's a matter of frame rate. It's the frame rate you're going to see.
Yeah. And when I go, if I were to pull up type VNC right now, I can type and change the field, but it's not zipping back and forth. You know, I've got a Cat6 line from here back to there. I also have a wireless router, and I can't tell whether it's running on the wireless router or the Cat6 line. But in either case, it doesn't really matter. It's like I said, I can do it on my iPhone on 3G. I can do everything I did just tonight. Do it on my iPad if I want to. I've been out at outreaches sometime, particularly when I didn't trust the system, and I got to go to an elementary school and show them the moon or something like that, or whatever it is I'm doing, and I'll pull out my iPhone and go, what's happening at home? And I'll say, oh, it's screwed up, and I'll say, stop that, start this, and just by pushing my finger around on the screen. But it's not my iPhone that's controlling anything here. My iPhone is just telling that laptop what to change, and that laptop's doing all the communication. Remember, this was not about remote imaging. This was about session management, and remote is not the same thing as automated.
Awesome, thanks.
Actually, just I'll say this because it helps to quantify it. My laptop is 50 feet that way via Wi-Fi connection, and when I transfer files in Windows, I see 150 kilobits per second transfer. That's slow, but Type VNC seems to work over it. If I were to carry my laptop into the house here, I'm going to get 2.4 megabits per second. So 150 kilobits per second seems sufficient enough for me to both use SGP and stream it to show you guys it. So it really is just a matter of that frame rate I'm getting. Now, it might get annoying. I might click something and it takes half a second to refresh. but it's not going to send my mountain to the wrong direction or PhD or anything like that. If that helps.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was curious about. Like if you had to make a change or use the focuser or something like that, if latency would be an issue, but it doesn't seem to be, so that's great.
Yep. Never really an issue. Just a matter of that frame rate. Might get annoying, but no danger. And Glenn's saying he did some imaging from Australia on iTelescope, which is probably the same thing, because there's definitely going to be some latency in that connection, but who knows how much.
Okay, great, guys. I got to go, but have a great night, and it was good to see everyone. Alex, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really nice. I appreciate it.
Good night, Sean. Glad you got your mic working.
Yeah, finally. All right, bye, guys.
Bye. Well, I'm actually going to bring the broadcast to a close because I think we've covered everything. If you want to chat after the fact, we're welcome to.
No, please. Sorry about that. Hey, I got to give this presentation next week at Nightfall, which is a big star party in Southern California, out in the desert in Borrego Springs. If you're anywhere in the area, please come by. It's really nice. We've got, 2 pools, a bar, a restaurant, a hotel, an RV resort, and we take all the lights out and turn it red. And I know most of you guys are far away, so it's not an advertisement really, but it's a really great star party. Warren Keller and his wife are coming out. Warren's going to be doing the main presentation, and then afterwards, I won't be here next week because I'm going to be taking Warren over to Tucson where he's doing his big show over there. But if you have any ideas as to what fluff to cut, this thing is supposed to be 45 minutes long. And I think it's probably 1 hour and 10 minutes long right now. And so if you've got parts where I need to cut out, get rid of, tell me about it. Okay?
I actually thought it was
the dress rehearsal.
I thought it was a great presentation. It was longer than 45 minutes, but hard to decide what to cut out.
It always is. It always is. That's a tough part. Okay. If you get any ideas, send them along.
All right, well, I'm going to stop the live broadcast now.